approval of the rotation schedule for November 12 to December of 2013. We all have it in our packets. Is there any comment? And do I hear a motion to, do we need a motion to accept this? We'll go ahead and,
I move we accept the panel rotation as presented.
I'll second it.
have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. We're down to agenda item number 2. These are postponements, and apparently we have withdrawals for agenda item 3 and 4 and 5. Henderson Prospect Partners, HD Development of Maryland, and John George. Is that correct? We have that?
Correct.
We have, okay. Then we'll go ahead and take all of the withdrawals in one motion, moving us down to agenda item number 6, Butler Manufacturing. Well, what is the status of that?
On that case, Your Honor, the person who is here, I'm sorry, I thought I was in court. The person in the audience is not, has not been designated an agent.
Okay.
And I guess in speaking with him, we've learned he would like a postponement.
Okay. So then that person isn't eligible to represent the client anyway. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess we're just going to entertain a request for postponement for agenda item number 6, Butler Manufacturing. You have an idea when they want it postponed or just postponed? Is there a date?
To the next
Next
hearing
meeting.
date, because they're timing out on their,
Okay.
When does it expire?
December 1st.
December 1st, so we can still do it in November. Have they done a 2-year waiver? Or is the assessor okay with the postponement?
Okay, so do we have a motion?
Want to postpone until when?
The next meeting in
Next meeting.
November 26th.
November. The 2 years is up December 1st, but we could still do it on November 26th.
6?
Yes.
Postpone item number 6 until November 26th.
Second the motion.
To have a motion and a second, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. So
I'm
agenda.
sorry, Mr. Chair, I wasn't thinking this through. If they haven't done a 2-year waiver, I'm just a teeny bit concerned about postponing it just regular, because if we have a flu epidemic at Thanksgiving and we can't get a quorum, that would put us past the 2-year limit. So do we want to change it to only if the applicant signs a 2-year waiver between now and November 26th?
Add to my motion, providing that the
Okay. And we have a second. So we have a motion, amended motion, and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, I'm sorry, I didn't think that through before you finished
That's
the
quite all right.
first motion.
Okay, that brings us to agenda item number 7. That's Apple 8 Hospitalities. Susan Orloff? I apologize that you had to come up a second time, but, okay, so if you'd like to step up to the microphone. And this item is regarding business property, isn't that correct?
No.
Chairman, it's real property.
Real property, okay. So
But
if
it's-
that's the case,
But it's
then,
not an owner-occupied single
right,
family.
that's what I was trying to.
Yes, so yes,
determine.
the applicant does have the burden of proof.
Right. So if the clerk will swear you and the assessor in?
Susan Orloff.
Do solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give in the matter now pending before this Assessment Appeals Board is the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Please state your name for the record.
Tim Kokendorfer?
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending before this Assessment Appeals Board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And the nature of this case is what?
This is a real property appeal for a hotel.
Okay. And the applicant's opinion of value?
The applicant's opinion of value for the entire hotel, including the personal property, is $5,577,000.
Okay. Oh, go ahead and present your case.
All right. I do have a handout, so if I can give that clerk here. How many copies do you need?
I think it's 8.
Could you explain to me what the difference is between the 5 million that you originally put on the application and the 557? 5,500,000.
At the time, well, let me look at the application.
I just want to know which categories you changed.
Typically, when we file an application, we put an estimate of value, and by the time we get to the hearing, we firm up our opinion a little bit more. So that was an estimate at that time, a rough estimate. We knew we didn't agree with the assessment, so we filed the appeal. All right. Does everybody have a copy of a handout? First off, I thank you for listening to the applicant's case this morning, and I look forward to walking you through the case for the hotel known as the Hampton Inn and Suites in Tulare, located at 1100 North Cherry Street in Tulare. I'll go to page 1. As I have already stated, this is a hospitality product. The parcel number is 170-102-039. It is a hotel that was built in 2008. It has a total of 86 rooms, and the 2011 real property assessment is $9,398,079. The personal property assessment is $680,550 for a total assessment on this hotel of $10,078,629. It's important to note at this point that we are not contesting the personal property value. However, as we value the hotel, we come up with a value for the entire hotel. And once we conclude to that value, we deduct the personal property, and the residual left is the real property. The amount we're deducting from our total opinion of value for the personal property is the assessed amount, so we have no discrepancy with the personal property value. Our opinion of value, as you'll see on the bottom of page 1, is $5,577,638 for the entire hotel. Deducted from that is the personal property, and we come up to a real property opinion of value of $4,897,088, or $4,009,000 rounded. I'll move on to page 2. In that, I talk about the purpose of this analysis is to estimate the fair market value of the fee simple estate for the property known as the Hampton Inn and Suites as of January 1st, 2011. We've made this analysis in accordance with California statutes and rules governing the appraisal of property tax assessment purposes. In so preparing this value, we've done it as pursuant to Section 110 of the California Revenue Taxation Code. Fair market value is defined as the amount of cash or its equivalent that the property would bring if exposed for sale in the open market, under conditions in which neither the buyer nor seller could take advantage of the exigencies of the other. Also, Property Tax Rule 2 of the California Code of Regulations states, fair market value when applied to real property referred to the unencumbered or unrestricted fee simple interest. To talk a little bit about the property's history. It's an 86-room limited service interior corridor hotel featuring a heated outdoor pool and jacuzzi, a very small fitness center, a business center, and a small conference room. The hotel is on 1.89 acres of land, is located just north of East Merritt Avenue, west of Highway 99, south of East Prosperity, and east of North M Street. It has approximately 60,000 square feet of improvements that were built in 2008. It was bought on June 26th of 2008 for $10,311,466. This is an important note to make here. The sales price for the June of 2008 event was determined prior to the start of construction of the project. This purchase price was determined using pro forma income assumptions in a rising market, which will be discussed in further detail as I move along here. The hotel was newly constructed and set to open shortly after construction was complete. And we've also shown on page 3 some of the assumptions that brought about the 10.3 roughly million purchase price. When you talk about a hotel, one of the most important guiding figures of the hotel is what's called RevPAR. And that's a definition for RevPAR is the revenue per available room. And how you find out RevPAR is you multiply the subject's occupancy by its average daily rate. So you really, when you're looking at a hotel, you don't want to look at just its occupancy or just its room rate. You want to look at how much revenue each room is bringing in. It's a key comparison statistic in the hotel industry. As you look at the Hampton Inn and Suites RevPAR on the top of page 3, this is what the buyer had projected when they paid a lofty amount of $10.3 million in 2008, which was actually established in 2007. They had hoped that then when they opened the hotel, they'd have a RevPAR of $59.15, and that by 2015, they'd hit a staggering amount of $88.91. That's occupancy times average daily rate. As I'll discuss later, the actual performance of the hotel very clearly did not meet any of these expectations. Valuation approach. The income approach is based on the present worth. Hold on one second. Did I lose my voice? It's based on the present worth of anticipated future benefits derived from a property. Value indicators are developed by capitalizing expected net operating incomes at an overall cap rate that incorporates the risk-free rate of the use of the funds, the expected rate of inflation, and most importantly, risks associated with the particular investment. Our analysis is based on the income approach to value solely. The cost approach was not utilized due to the fact that the hospitality properties are typically exchanged based on their income-producing abilities. The main factor placing the greatest weight on the income approach at the subject is an investment-grade income-producing property, where a knowledgeable investor would consider quantity, quality, and risk of the income stream. In applying the approaches to value, the appraiser is challenged to reconcile the separate indicators into a final estimate. The greatest weight here should be given to the approach that most reliably measures the types of benefits sought by buyers in the market for the subject property. In this case, that is the income approach. A buyer of this property would be looking to see how much money the property could bring in. It is an income-producing property. The income approach to value is used in conjunction with other approaches when the property under appraisal is purchased in anticipation of a money income and either has an established income stream or can be attributed a real or hypothetical income stream by comparison with other properties. It is the preferred approach for the appraisal of improved real properties and personal property when reliable sales data are not available and the cost approaches are unreliable because the reproducible property has suffered considerable physical depreciation, functional obsolescence, or economical obsolescence. In the case of the subject property, you have a large amount of economic obsolescence that occurred from the time it opened in 2008 to the way the market stands on January 1st of 2011. As I move to page 5, I will start off with my income approach. There are two ways you can value an income-producing property. One is using a direct cap approach, and the other is using a discounted cash flow analysis, which I will refer to as a DCF. Direct cap is best used when a single year's income is expected to remain constant over a period of many years. A discounted cash flow analysis estimates value by forecasting income and expenses over a typical investment holding period. The income stream of the subject has underperformed expectations and has not been steady. Thus, in our analysis, we rely on a discounted cash flow method to attempt to project a potential upside for future income streams. We've relied on the subject's own income and expense history, reviewed PKF and HOST as well, and provided direct comparison to the anticipated income assumptions at the time of purchase. On pages 5 through about 11, I'm going to walk you through the assumptions that I made for the discounted cash flow. In addition to that, I'll be referring on a regular basis to pages 17 and 19. Just so as I flip back and forth, you know where I'm going here. Page 17 is a summary of the hotel's actual income stream. So what they actually did, the money they got is on page 17. Page 19 is my discounted cash flow that I'm going to be talking about. So all the numbers as I walk through them are the ones that are plugged into page 19. So that as you look back and forth and you say, where does she end up with this? That's where it is on page 19. So as you go through an income approach on an income producing property, the first step is to estimate what your potential total revenues are. Income from the subject property is produced via the rooms, food and beverage, communications, and other departments. We've looked at all of these departments and included the actual performance of the subject from opening through 2011. We start off with the total available room nights, which you get by multiplying the total number of guest rooms, which in this case is 86, at the subject by 365 days per year. Hence, the subject has 31,390 available room nights per year. Occupancy. In determining our estimated occupancy rate, we've looked at the subject's actual performance. We've summarized the actual occupancy results on the following table on page 6. In 2009, the occupancy was 59.87%. In 2010, it was 62.9%, and in 2011, it was 71.4%. One of the primary goals is to maintain occupancy over average daily rate. So a hotel would like to get people into their hotel. It allows them to keep a regular staff in place, keep cleaning crews, keep everything running. In the case of this property, one of the main mantras is you want heads in beds. It's important to get people into the hotel. Based on this philosophy, we model growth beginning higher than historical performance. We start our discounted cash flow at 70% occupancy, which is a full 8% higher than the actuals in 2010, and we stabilize at 75%. Average daily rate. The average daily rate is defined as the total room revenue for a given period, divided by the total number of occupied rooms during that period. We've summarized the actual historical average daily rate for the subject below. In 2009, the average daily rate was $85.53. In 2010, it was $83.16, and in 2011, it's $85.78. In estimating average daily rate, we've relied on the subject property. We've seen a low of $83.16 in 2010 and a high of $85.78 in 2011. In preparing our discounted cash flow analysis, we begin at a first-year average daily rate above the 2010 figure. We start at $85, and we arrive at $95.67 by our reversion year, increasing the average daily rate amount by 3% each year. Again, on page 7, I'm going to go back to talking to revenue per available room, which is taking those statistics of occupancy and average daily rate and multiplying them by each other. As you can see, the subject property has a RevPAR in 2009 of 51.21. In 2010, they barely inch up to 52.31. And in 2011, they're finally at 61.31. When you take the actual RevPAR of the subject property and you put it next to what they thought they were going to get in 2008, That's what the graph you'll see on the bottom of page 7. You'll see how the expectations of how this hotel was going to perform hugely outweighed the actual results. You'll see their RevPAR, they expected it to start at $59.15 in 2008, and by 2011, they expected to be at $79. In 2010, they thought they were going to be at $75.96. Where they really were in 2010 is $52.31. There's an incredibly large gap of what the hotel owners thought they were going to get in income in this property and what they actually received. And that's at the top line. That's not even after expenses. That's just what they thought was going to come in the door. As we look at this in our discounted cash flow analysis, we've started with a RevPAR of $53.50 and we end at $71.75. So what goes into revenue and what percentage of it? The first category is room revenue. That's generated from the sale of rooms, and in this hotel, which is basically a limited service hotel, it represents the largest amount of revenue for the hotel. We've estimated that the revenue coming from rooms would make up 98% of the revenue for the whole property. Food and beverage revenue is generated from food and beverage sales occurring at the hotel. This property doesn't have a full-service restaurant. It does provide a rather good complimentary breakfast. I had one this morning, so I can attest to it. It's got fruit and everything else. And it has an on-site convenience store for grab-and-go items. In full-service hotels, typically most food and beverage revenue is generated from the guests staying at the hotel. We looked at the food and beverage revenue on this, and in the past 3 years, it's averaged between $25,000 and $35,000. So it's a sundry amount, very small amount that comes in from them selling whatever someone might need in food and beverage. It's about 1.5% of the total revenues. Then there's a category called other income revenue. Those don't fall into food and beverage or room. They can be telecommunications, a business center, audiovisual equipment, and miscellaneous items. In the past few years, the hotel has achieved anywhere from $8,500 to $11,500 as other income. And we've estimated the other income for this property to be 0.5% of the total revenues. On the bottom of page 8, you will see another graph which will show you the actual revenue for 2009, 2010, and the budget for 2011, as well as the actuals for 2011. That's the blue line. The red line is the projections we've made for the future. So we are trying to be optimistic as the hotel owners were in projecting that this hotel will do better over time. Next, you come to what are called departmental expenses for the hotel. These expenses are typically analyzed as a percentage of the department they're in. We looked at the actual property expenses of the subject. The first expense is rooms expense. This is related typically to the sale and upkeep of guest rooms and public space. The average for the subject has been 33.12% to 33.35%. We've looked at this, and for our analysis, we've taken it from a conservative range of 32% in the beginning of our discounted cash flow and decreased it down to 30% by our reversionary year. Food and beverage expense relates to any food and beverage expenses there were. This number's fluctuated kind of all over the board between 2009 and 2011. We looked at an estimate of 60% going down to 40% at the end of our reversion. This is a very small amount in that food and beverage really doesn't comprise much of the income or expense of this hotel. The last category is called other expenses. Those expenses typically have been in the 44 to 47% range of other revenues. The actual expenses have been over 100%. In 2009, they were 150%. In 2010, they were 237%. And in 2011, they're 190%. This sounds like high numbers, but basically, you're talking about expense numbers of anywhere from $21,000 to $25,000. So they're netting out the income they're bringing in. The next category of expenses you have is called undistributed expenses. Those expenses do not relate directly to the rooms, they relate more to the property. They're typically fixed to some extent, and they don't fluctuate as much with occupancy and average daily rate. The first expense is administrative in general. This includes the salaries and wages of all administrative personnel, not directly associated with the department. Most of these expenses are fixed. The subject's A&G expense range between 11.29 and 12.04% of total revenues. We've relied on the performance of the subject, as well as looking at PKF and host, and we came up to a stabilized A&G expense of 11% after the 4-year period. The next category is called sales and marketing. This expense includes all expenses associated with the advertising, sale, and promotion of the hotel. These activities are designed to obtain new guests and ensure repeat business. Historical marketing expenses have ranged between 8.71% and 9.08% of total revenues. We've estimated 9% of total revenues to sales and marketing. Maintenance expense. Maintenance expense is largely comprised of repairs necessary to keep the facility open, plumbing, heating, electrical, and so forth. Those expenses have ranged between 4.5% and 5%, and we started off with a 4.5% expense and stabilized it at 4.25%. Energy and utilities, that includes water, gas, and electric. Subject's energy expenses range between 5.73% and 5.92%, and that is of total revenues over the last 3 years. We've relied on the actual historic performance and estimating an expense of 6% in year 1, reaching 5.75% at the reversion. Reserves for replacement are a necessary part of holding and maintaining a property. This is an amount set aside by the owners to replenish the return on and return of personal property. We calculated this fee as a percentage of total revenues based on the actual expense the hotel incurs annually. So the hotel is required to set an amount aside for personal property every year by their owners. Or not personal property, replacement for reserve, and they set aside 5% each year. Franchise and royalty fees. It is a franchise. They pay a franchise fee. The subject's franchise fee is just below 5%. We've estimated a franchise fee of 4.95%. Management fee covers the basic fee paid to the hotel's management company. Basically, this fee is set at 3% at the subject property, which is within the range of what other hotels are paying as well. Insurance. Subject's overall insurance expense has been in the range of 1.23 to 1.83. We've estimated it at 1.5 over the holding period. Next, I'll move on to page 12, where I'm going to talk about the market, what led up to January 1st of 2011, and what changed between when we looked at this property originally and when we look at it today. There are not that many comparable sales in the hospitality industry. As of January 1st of 2011, a number of the sales that occurred were either negotiated in advance or overall the volume of trading slowed down considerably. When this property was purchased back in July of 2008, due diligence had been performed well before the time of close, and the sales price and projections for income reflected increasingly ambitious values, not uncommon in the booming economy.
Can I interrupt you for a minute? What was the total sales price? What did he pay for the property?
That is on page 2. In June of 2008, they paid $10.3 million.
Okay, thank you.
So basically, they paid in June of 2008 $10.3 million, right before everything collapsed. Between September and December of 2008, we experienced a well-documented global economic meltdown. Alone during this 4-month period, several large multinational banks and investment companies failed. Personal and retirement savings were decimated, and property values collapsed. Congress passed an emergency unprecedented $1 trillion stimulus package to attempt to save the global economy. Notable casualties of the market collapse include Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, Merrill Lynch, Washington Mutual, Wachovia, and Countrywide. As you sit back and think about this, these collapses occurred some mere months after the subject property was purchased, and that purchase price in June of '08 was set already in 2007. So talk about bad timing for the subject property. They thought things were going to keep going better right at a time when the bottom was about to fall out of the market. September 15th, 2008, marked what analysts now call Bloody Monday, or the beginning of the most serious financial crisis since the Great Depression. The financial storm that began with bad bets on mortgage-backed investments reached new intensity with September's federal takeover of mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. That historical bailout failed to soothe markets, and shockwaves spread well beyond financial firms and brought unprecedented government interventions. The next part is what's really important, because basically at that point in time, lending was essentially frozen in this new collapsed market. And that's why you have a lot less sales occurring. It left a tight cinch belt on a lot of real estate purchases, new construction, leasing, and sales. This dramatic downturn very truly sharpened the focus on properties that underwent transactions in the peak economic marketplace, causing never-seen-before statistics for foreclosures, defaults, and property performance in the hospitality industry. As the industry struggled through 2009 with historic low marks in net income, 2010 showed flat performance or slight signs of improvements over the prior year. The devastating part of that small positive, the improvement was nowhere near the numbers achieved in 2008 or 2007, in the height of the market when so many financially impressive transactions were negotiated. As Atlas Hospitality Group predicted in early 2010, the number of hotels in California in default or foreclosed on continued to increase through the third quarter of 2010. Atlas Hospitality, founded in 1997, specializes in the sale of California hotels and has sold more hotels in the state than any other brokerage firm. They produce quarterly surveys that track every hotel in California. According to Mr. Ray, the California hotel market continues to experience a high level of distress as the pace of defaults and foreclosures continues to accelerate. Although there's been some positive news in the defaults and in the hotel industry in terms of increased occupancy and possibly some slight movement in average daily rate, Ray estimates there's a huge backlog of distressed California hotels, with more than 1,000 hotels operating under some sort of forbearance agreement. Atlas concludes that 75% of all hotels in California were financed or refinanced between 2005 and 2007. The same group of property has no equity left. They may not be covering operating costs, struggle to cover debt, and likely will not recover their peak values until 2015 or 16. When you look at the number of properties in default in California, and I'm talking only hospitality here, an initial stage in the foreclosure process, the volume rose from the beginning of 2009 at 53 properties statewide to 306 by the end of 2009. Of those, 81 were bought or built with loans acquired in 2006 and 2007, when hotel values accelerated. This is the subject property. You're talking about a hotel that was bought basically in 2007, closed escrow in 2009, at a time when everything was just going to be fabulous. The bubble burst, hit the hospitality industry hard, as those statistics only increased through 2010 and through 2011. In the second quarter report for 2011, the survey shows the number of foreclosed hotels increased 91% over the same period in 2010. Interestingly, there was a decline in defaults in early 2011, but when asked about this, Alan Ray stated, "The decline in defaults is a reflection of hotels doing better in certain marketplaces." He states that even though Revenues have increased over where they were last year. Why are we seeing more defaults and foreclosures? It's because they simply have too much debt on them. As indicated before, the transactions from a few years earlier have now had multiple years falling well short of their projections, and they simply cannot stretch any further. If you look at the typical hotel, and if you look at the subject, it opened in 08, so the hotels that were doing tremendously were bought in 06, 07, 08. They had income projections that they thought they were going to meet. They spent money on the hotels thinking they were going to get to that stage. 09 was probably the worst year. I look at hundreds of hotel operating statistics that I've ever seen. 10, in most cases, was a smidgen better than 09. So everybody says, oh, look, the market is getting better. What's happening in reality is that you have basically the same income in 2010 you had in 2009, and that income is a mere fraction of what the owners thought they would get. Now you have owners who held on for 1 year, 2009, and thought this can't possibly happen anymore, and they keep hoping they can hold on. But there's only so long that an owner can hold on with very minimal income. In my opinion, as Alan Ray stated as well, by the end of 2010, you have so many more of these foreclosures and defaults coming about because people can't hold on anymore. Unless you're an owner with a deep pocket, and it has to be pretty deep, you're going to lose the property, which is what I'm going to talk about next here. To show hard evidence of how the hospitality marketplace has reacted to the economic downturn, we have a table with paired sales. A paired sale is when one property goes through two separate sale transactions and therefore indicates a market trend due to the fact that all other variables are exactly the same. On pages 14 and 15, we've listed a number of these sales up and down California that occurred. Some of them I have more details on, others less. The Sheraton Universal, a property I have represented and am intimately familiar with, was bought in January of 07 for $122 million. In 07, they had net operating income of $10.7 million. The owner then dumped about another $20 to $25 million in it to make it even better. By the end of 09, when their net income went down to $2.8 million. So they were, when they bought the hotel, they were looking at $10.7 million. By the end of 2009, they were at $2.8 million. They went into receivership, and the property was sold in the open market in January of 2011 for $90 million. So this shows a decline of 26%, which is actually even larger than the 26%, because the sales price don't take into consideration the $25 million they put into it. The next hotel that was bought in the height of the market is the Marriott in downtown LA, sold for $109 million in March of 07, resold in March of 2010 for $63 million, a 42% decline. Hawthorne Suites in Sacramento sold in July of 07 for $20.7 million. This property was foreclosed on in September of 2011. This one had a 2007 year-end net operating income of roughly $2.3 million. Sold recently in the open market, was listed for sale for a total of $5.6 million, or a decline of 73%. By the time they sold, their net operating income in 2010 was $435,000. Extended Stay of America, that's every single extended stay across the United States. They sold their entire portfolio in June of 2007. Smart seller, I would say, for $8 billion. In 2009, they filed for bankruptcy. In October of 2010, they sold that same group of hotels across the United States for $3,930,000, a drop of 50%. That hotel type is very typical of the subject property. As you can see, it's a limited service type hotel. Subject property is not an all-suite hotel, but it's very similar to the extended stay. More on the local front here in Big Bear Lake, The Northwoods Resort Hotel was bought in July of '08 for $12.5 million, sold in December 10 for $9.7 million. The Ontario Marriott sold in January of '03 for $25.7 million, sold again in August of 2010 for $12 million, or a decline of 53%. There is a hotel in Rancho Cucamonga, bought in January of '08 for $13 million, actually built in January of '08 for $13 million, sold in February of '11 for $8 million. In Fresno, you have the Park Inn by Radisson, sold in September of '08, foreclosed on, sold in September of '08 for $21.9 million, so roughly the same time as the subject property. Was foreclosed on in August of '11. Currently, it's listed for sale at $10 million. Again, you're looking at a drop of over 50%. The Econo Lodge in Ontario sold in October of '09 for $5,735,000. Turned around and sold it in December of '09 for $3,625,000. The Quality Inn of Fresno, this owner apparently didn't have as deep a pockets as some others. He didn't last very long. He bought it in April of '08 for $7.9 million, sold it in April of '09 for $5.1 million. The Yucca Inn and Suites, purchased in October of '05 for $3.3 million, sold in September of '09 for $1,450,000. The Hawthorne Suites in San Diego, sold in December of '06 for $6.2 million, and resold in July of 2010 for $2.8 million. I'll let you walk through the rest of these on page 15. But what these tell you, and what I'm trying to tell you at this point is, all of these hotels were bought at the height of the market, paid for with money that the owner thought they were going to get a certain amount of income. They didn't get it. And when they had to sell their hotel in 2010, around that January of '11 time, they had to sell their hotel based on what they had in their hand at that point in time. And what you have in your hand at that point in time, January 11, is a whole lot of hotels in the state of California and in the United States in a foreclosure or default position with income levels that haven't been seen since the early 2000s. So you're looking at hotels up and down the state that are distressed. That is the market of these hotels at this point in time. You take that back to the subject property, you look at what they thought they were going to make in income. They didn't get anywhere close to that. And they are managed and operated, excuse me, by competent managers. They have a franchise flag. Let's see if I can find a cough drop. Might be the way to go. You'll bear with me.
Allergies act up when they get here.
But as you look, that's the story of the subject hotel. Will it pick up to its seen value from '08, maybe by 2015, 2016? I hope. Depends which debate you listen to and which politician and how much better they're going to make us. But really it comes back to putting heads in beds and these hotels achieving a level of income that they thought they were going to achieve. It's an income-producing property. Someone who buys it is going to buy it based on the income that they've seen the property achieve in the past and what they think it can do in the future. I've been up here now a few times. I go to Cool Hand Luke's for dinner when I come here. I talk to people and I said, what do you know about this area? One guy explained to me on my last visit at the bar. He said, we were going to have a NASCAR track here. And I thought, I'm going to look that up. And your fabulous NASCAR track here, it was talked about. And lo and behold, it was talked about in '07, '08, when everybody thought everything was possible. It fizzled, as I'm sure you know. You look at the NASCAR track. It didn't happen due to environmental concerns, monetary concerns. Most likely, long story short, and I am a NASCAR fan too, a NASCAR race will only bring NASCAR here once a year. That's not enough to substantiate the dollar amounts that are going to be spent. I talked to other people in the bar and said, you know, what do people come here for other than when they're driving by? They said, the International Agricultural Convention. And they said, you can't find a room anywhere when that goes on. I said, okay. I said, how long does that last, covering the rooms? They said, about a month, where rooms are really booked. I said, okay. So now you're a hotel owner, and you have maybe your room filled 100% of the time for a month. What about those 11 other months? That's what you're talking about when you look at this hotel. Is NASCAR coming? No. Is your convention all year long? No. The hope is that more and more people will drive by and stay at this hotel, but in order for that to happen, your economy has to increase. That hasn't really been shown yet. When we looked at the paired sales, the best case scenario was a value difference of a negative 22%. But the majority of these properties sold for about half of their prior sale. Clearly, the fact that income and hospitality properties have not met income expectations is finally being reflected in the market. This must be considered in the income approach. We also looked at 3 sales as our hotel cap rate sales, as comparables for cap rates. Cap rate sale 1 is the sale of a Fairfield Inn by Marriott in Turlock, sold in June of 2011. This property has outperformed the subject and average daily rate, has 78 rooms, and was built in 2009. It sold for a cap rate of 8%. Cap rate sale number 2 is a sale in February of 11 of a Comfort Inn and Suites in Lancaster, sold for a 9.1 cap rate. Cap rate sale number 3 is a Quality Inn in Fresno, and this sold for an 11.98 cap rate. We looked at these sales and also surveys in the area and looked at what cap rates are, and we concluded to a capitalization rate of 8%. To this, we added 1.1936 for taxes, for a total rate of 9.19% as of January 1st. As you move to page 17, that's where I told you you'll see the summary of how the subject performed. We've provided you with budgets for 2009 and 2011, so you would get a sense of what they thought they were going to do and what they did. As you can see, net operating income in 2010 was $352,000. In 2011, it was $391,000. Put your finger on page 17 and then turn to page 18. Page 18 tells you what they had hoped to do when they bought the hotel. When they bought the hotel, the owners projected in 2009 that they would have a RevPAR of 67.52. Their RevPAR was 51.21. They projected they were going to have $936,000 in net income. They had $321,000 in net income. In 2010, they projected a RevPAR of $75.96. Their actual RevPAR was $52.31. They projected $1.1 million plus in NOI. They achieved $352,000 in NOI. And this goes on as to the projections. Page 19 is a summary of all of that discussion I've just walked through in the calculations. As you'll see, when I value hotels, there's always a certain set of numbers I gear in on. One is total revenue. What projections are you making for total revenue? And the other is net income. Everything in between, the assessor and I, we could talk all day about it. And it can move a little bit this way and that way, but really, those are the projections you look at the most. We're projecting in 2011 $1.9 million in income, and in our reversion, we project just under $2.3 million in total revenue, let me add. Our net operating income we project for 2011 is just under $400,000. We increased that by our reversionary year to $571,111. As I stated, we use an 8 cap rate, we add for taxes, and we come up to a total value on this hotel of $5,577,000. Deduct from that the personal property assessment, you come up to a real value of $4,000,009. That primarily summarizes the subject property and how the taxpayer looks at the subject property as an income-producing property. They look at the income. They look at what's going on in the market. As of January 1st of 2011, you had a very, very volatile market. You had income on the subject that continued to stay at low levels and hadn't shown any turnaround yet. Having looked at the income approach, looking at the market in the whole, we kindly ask that you find for a total value on this hotel of $5,577,000. And I
Very
thank
good.
you.
Any questions from board members?
When was this hotel built?
Started in 2007, finished in 2008. I'm going to find the cough drop.
Why didn't you use the cost approach on this?
Because by 2011, you had such a large amount of economic obsolescence. You're basically, if I do a cost approach, I'm reconciling to an income approach and deducting whatever the difference is as economic obsolescence. Plus, at that point in time, you wouldn't have a buyer buying it based on what it costs to build. Not with so many hotels in the market, not meeting that. It's not how the buyer would look at it. It's not how an informed investor would look at it either.
So your client purchased this property for $10,300,000, is that correct?
That is correct, in 2008.
And does he own other hotels besides this?
Yes, they do.
How many?
Oh, I don't know offhand.
Or would you call him a sophisticated investor then?
Most certainly, yes.
Helps, Mr. Fowler, they not only own this one here in this county, they have 2 in Clovis.
They have what?
They have 2 hotels in Clovis they own.
Oh, they own hotels throughout the United States.
Throughout the United States?
I mean, I'd estimate a minimum of 100 hotels, but I couldn't tell you the exact number.
Like they were off on their projections. What did they base the projections in Tulare County on? Not the farm show for sure.
I think they base their projections like all other hotel investors, hoping that previous numbers would continue to occur. As you saw with the Parrot sales, there were a number of hotels that all had projections thinking they were going to keep going, and they didn't. They didn't.
Okay.
Mr. McKinley?
What do you mean by reversion? Is that what you're saying is an actual, the value you're using to compute your cap rate on?
Yes. That's Mr. McKinley, not Mr. Ennis. Huh?
That's correct.
Oh, we missed the correct.
Well, it's
That's
fallen
our-
down.
The
Oh, it fell
RevPAR
down.
for 2011 on your sheet that's got the reversion on it shows a RevPAR of 5950. Actual RevPAR, as I read it on the page before that, is 6131.
Correct.
What's the difference between those two?
One is my estimate, or the estimate that an owner would make as of the beginning of the year, based on what they'd seen in the prior years. On page 17, you'll also see the budget. The hotel prepared a budget. They only budgeted $54 on a RevPAR. So in our estimate, we went above what they budgeted, but we didn't go as far high as they actually achieved in 2011. We were close by about $2 off.
Your cap rate, you base on 3 hotels, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you check with local banks or local real estate people at all, or?
We looked at hotel investor surveys. We talked to our owner. I personally appraise hundreds of hotels throughout California, so I see the range of cap rates that are out there based on surveys, Corpaz, all the various different things that are out there. I feel our cap rate was rather conservative. And we also were conservative in our income estimates based on what was going on, and felt it was fair within the range of what was going on out there.
Cap rate for the hotels is different than the rest of the real estate investments in an area? Is it very particular to hotels?
Yeah, hotels, each product has its own cap rates, clearly. So if you're looking at multifamily res, I'd say those are lower. If you're looking at office, those are higher. Hospitality is one of those tricky kind of things, because I often say you can't compare it to an office building. Because in an office building, you have rents, you have leases, you have people. If something tragic happens, like 9/11, and I appraised hotels during 9/11, literally you have a full building and then you have an empty building, because people don't have to commit to a hotel. They say, I'm going tomorrow, and then they say, I'm not going. Maybe a cancellation fee, but really, all of a sudden you've got an empty building. Hotels are riskier in that extent if you have a volatile market. Now, some will argue to you, it's kind of like a small stock. They're riskier in a volatile market. If things turn around, all of a sudden we're all flush with cash, we're going on vacation, a hotel can pick up that money faster than anybody else because they can increase their room rates. So it all depends how comfortable you are with risk. You risk a hotel going downhill quickly. It can also move up quickly. Is it the same as other buildings? It's in that range. I mean, you're looking at investors, but typically hospitality investors are their own animal versus office investors. So they're looking at different types of thing. They can't look at like in an office building, if you have a quality tenant, you can't look at the quality tenant in a hotel. You're going to have a different one in every room. So you don't have that set of criteria that you look at. In my opinion, quite often hotels are riskier than other types of income-producing properties. But like I said, you can also argue that you have a better upside. A bit more of a Las Vegas kind of gamble, I'd say.
Could you toot your own horn for a minute and tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience and so forth?
Absolutely. By the time I'm all done, I'll tell you I'm 29 years old. Plus.
That blows that credibility.
I started, actually I'm a graduate of the University of Southern California Business School, and I started with the Los Angeles County Assessor's Office in the late 1980s. I worked there for 5 years, went through their training program, and appraised primarily shopping centers and hotels. That was my area of expertise at that time. In the early 1990s, after I was there for 5 years, I jumped ship and went to work for a boutique firm in Southern California. Stayed with them from 94 till 2000, until they went out of business. And people often ask me why that firm went out of business. It's a quick aside, but it's a valuable business lesson. It was two gentlemen who opened their own firm, and when they first started, you have nothing to split, so when you have to split nothing, nobody disagrees. And they had nothing in writing. So a few years later, when they had a whole lot to split, and they had nothing in writing, they sued each other. And the whole company was dissolved. Because when you have a lot to split, nobody can agree. Right about that time, which was 2000,